Good afternoon. It's Thursday. No, it's not. It's Tuesday, the 3rd of March 2015, just after 1 o'clock, and welcome to UK Column News. What an amazing day, really. Weekend. Apologies for the slightly abrupt start there, because we've just got back in after a weekend of the British Constitution Group conference. So we're getting back into the swing of things. First of all, the weather here in Plymouth is pretty chilly with some amazingly heavy showers and also quite a lot of hail overnight. Across the country, we've got everything from sunny in Essex to cold, wet and windy in Penzance, lovely sunshine in Pembrokeshire. So a mix of weather across UK, a bit like the political system at the moment. But first of all, let's have a look at a video clip of the conference at the weekend.
Okay, well, my name's John Bernard Hurst. My only claim to fame is 30 years police service, man and boy. I retired 8 years ago, and my main interest is the common law, and I want to uphold it. And the first thing you need to do is study it. I'm gifted with a good memory. It doesn't mean I'm clever. I've got good memory. My mother and my older daughter can both do the same trick on topics they're interested in, and I'm glad to be able to share some of the material that I've researched. And today it's been the grand jury. It was 80 years since the last grand jury was held. It's a common law thing, and the common law never goes away. If it's broken, it's infringed. It doesn't go away. And what we aim to do is restore it, feed it back into the system, and hopefully some honest judges and some honest lawyers will support our efforts. So that's what we've done today. I've got 3 verdicts which I'm going to feed into the mainstream system, starting with the Old Bailey, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, my name's Ian Puddick. For day-to-day work, I run and manage a leak detection company. And the reason I'm here, I've been speaking about the police state. And my definition of a police state is when the police are not always subject to the same laws that you and I would be subject to. I've been talking about my new website, which is policecrimes.co.uk, which will detail all of the crimes from 1970 to now that are basically police crimes, and it's this lack of accountability. So the real issues are, there's examples of a detective chief superintendent taking huge cash bribes from a cocaine gang, and when he's found out, he's allowed to retire early. Whereas if that had been you and I, we'd be in prison now. I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be holding that microphone. Whereas someone who's sworn an oath to uphold the law, breaking the law in such a serious manner, can retire. I mean, it's a farce. So the issue is the lack of accountability, however you look at it.
Yeah, I'm John Witterick. I started the website called Get Out of Debt Free, and what it is, it's basically a website which allows people to challenge their debt by actually asking the bank or the debt collectors some very, very simple questions. It wasn't my own idea. It's actually based on the work of Mary Elizabeth Croft, and it's gone from being a tiny little website with very few visitors to now getting between 3,000 and 5,000 people every day. So it's taking off, and it's continuing to grow. Today I've just been talking about how ridiculous the current financial system is. I've actually asked the hall, has anyone here had a loan? And of course a few people put their hands up. I said, no, you haven't had a loan because the bank haven't actually got any money to lend you. And this is the big con. I was also talking about the fact that when they create money out of nothing and then charge interest, that money doesn't exist. And so there's always going to be people defaulting, and they also have to actually inflate the actual financial system exponentially. So we've got this incredible amount of money just being added to, and of course you can't have an exponential system in a finite world, which means the current system at some point, and I think we're getting very, very close, has got to crash. And I think and just feel the energy in this room over this weekend. I feel so many people are getting so close in lots of different areas that it's actually getting, this year, I think Field said earlier that this year I think we're going to see some huge changes. And I think this weekend's been a fantastic catalyst towards that.
Well, as John was saying there, Brian, I mean, the atmosphere among the audience, the determination among the audience at the conference was absolutely spectacular, wasn't it?
Exceptional.
And I think of any conference that we've held over the years, it's clear that there's a change in people's attitude to what's going on around them.
I think there's a huge change. I think people are now seeing events unfold in the country, and a lot of people, of course, recognising how serious things are. It is the time for action. Comments in the chat box, somebody said, well, I thought I was clued up till I actually got to the conference, and then the information just poured out. And we felt that as well, although we knew a little bit about what speakers were going to present. We didn't actually know the detail till they got on stage. So much information about so many areas. And I think we'll just bring you on screen.
Well, but before we do that, I just wanted to say something about what John Hirst was talking about there, because really we can't underplay the potentially historic significance of this, because what happened here was that real grand juries were held, real verdicts were produced, and real private prosecutions are going to be brought as a result of that. And that is pretty spectacular.
Indeed, and in fact this was another area that we watched closely to see how the audience reacted, how they took part in that. And it was very clear that once the grand juries, 4 grand juries formed during the conference, once we were seeing those juries formed, it was amazing to see how seriously people took it, and 2, how when they were actually involved in the juries, how rigorous they were in questioning people who were putting evidence into them. So it was not only learning about the grand jury process, it was actually putting it into practice. And as you've said, the aim is to take this forward with private prosecutions. And this is a vehicle by which people can bring people in positions of power and authority to book. So important stuff. Well, okay, bring it back onto Mike Robinson. Here he is on screen speaking at the conference. And, well, you were actually having a look at the attack going on at the Constitution.
The attack on the Constitution, constitutional reform, and discussing some of the legislation that's come out recently in this area. So what can I say about that? Some of the legislation that's been coming out recently absolutely undermining the judicial process and our common law. It was one of the points, I mean, the slide that you've chosen there is showing actually some of our past monarchs, 2 of them there that have actually run the country relatively successfully and relatively in the interests of normal, ordinary people rather than some elite. And the point I was making here is that we perhaps shouldn't be throwing out the monarchy as such, but perhaps some of the monarchs that have existed and this current incumbent aren't doing their jobs. And I think if there's a catchphrase that this is the time for action, one of the other catchphrases that came out from many of the other speakers as well as myself was that really what we need is people to be doing their jobs.
Well, that's it exactly. 1 or 2 people already commenting that we know there's been a change of heart, it would appear, by the police in some parts of the country. And there was an action over the last few days where the police were directly challenging, well, we understand, arrested bailiffs who were not using correct court forms. So it does appear that the police themselves, in at least some of the police districts, are beginning to wake up.
Well, let's just be a bit more specific about that, because what they actually asked the bailiffs was, do you have a seal on the warrant, the alleged warrant that you're carrying, and does it have a signature? And this is really what the 2 of the key areas that Guy Taylor and the response teams and everybody that's involved in that particular campaign have been trying to get through to the police, that these are required. And for the police to actually act on that is a real development.
Indeed. Well, of course, the police came under a lot of criticism by speakers, and Ian Puddick here, who has suffered enormously to the extent that anti-terrorist police were used by the City of London to get at him, raid his home, raid his business. And he put out a tremendous amount of factual information reflecting absolute corruption in City of London police. And of course, this is extremely worrying if we can't trust our police to tell the truth, to do their jobs, to be honest and upstanding, then the country is in a very dangerous position. But of course, even Ian Puddick recognised that the trouble in the police is due to a relatively small number of bad men and women. But what he did say, of course, is it relies on the good policemen and women to stand up and be counted to put things to right. Well, his view was backed up strongly by Michael Docherty, also talking about the cover-up culture with the police, and in his own cases, what he's had to do to get justice. So he's had to force through private prosecutions. Indeed, even against the church. It's really sad when we're now in Britain in 2015 where we can't even trust the church to be telling the truth and standing up for what's right. Good news across the conference, though, because we had people coming together to work together for truth and to bring the right change into the country. Mark Salon here from Get Out of Debt Free, obviously talking about the scam of the loan system and the banking system and how people can overturn that. Guy Taylor, many of you will know, Guy talking about his experience of corruption in the courts, and as Mike Robinson has just said, Guy was also talking about the use of fraudulent forms and documentation within the courts themselves. So it was a wonderful event. We enjoyed it. And it was tremendous to see so many different groups coming together, sharing information and starting to work together in a very nice, loose, relaxed way. And of course, one of the things that UK Column and the British Constitution Group have always warned about is that if we get our structures too tight, this allows the infiltrators to come in and then the trouble starts. So. Brilliant event. We enjoyed it, and thank you very much to all the people who made the effort to come.
Yes. While we were at Telford on Sunday night, after the sort of formal part of the programme was finished, we were having a beer, as we did, and on Sky Television, because of course in the bar the television was on with the volume down, as they normally are. And on Sky Television, on Sky News, they had a ticker coming along referring to this. So I wanted to highlight this article in the Times this morning. I'm just going to quote from the first couple of lines of this. Are we seriously on the brink of handing powers to the government to ban undesirable speakers from university campuses? Will ministers, on the advice of civil servants, draft lists of preachers, ideologues and campaigners whose opinions are classified as extreme and bar them from setting foot on university premises? This appears to be the plan. We're not talking about people who incite terrorism and violence. That's already a criminal offence. So too are condoning or glorifying acts of terror. The aim is to banish speakers who advocate non-violent extremism, and so on. So it goes on. This development by the British government is being presented as an attempt to prevent to target Islamic extremism specifically, but of course what they're actually talking about is non-violent extremism, and they're not really being quite so specific about it. It could actually be broadened out to a much broader group. Would anti-fracking campaigners be considered to be non-violent extremists? Is that an extreme thing? Is what we're doing extremist? Is the British Constitution Group, anybody that wants to stand up for the Constitution, is that extremist? Where does this end, Brian?
Well, I think where it's heading is anybody who dares to stand up and criticise the government or even the public sector in certain areas, police for example, is being classified as a dangerous extremist. And of course the clampdown on free speech, classic sign of a dictatorship unfolding. And perhaps, as I mentioned a few days ago, we know that mainstream journalists are now suddenly starting to get wobbly as they realise that their own ability to report news and the truth is being interfered with by the state. So this is very dangerous legislation. Of course, it's coming straight from David Cameron's government, but who is he supported by? Well, Nick Clegg, of course, and as we've repeatedly warned, Labour, Marxist Party, is right there in the background.
And on The Intercept this morning, Glenn Greenwald posting an article here highlighting that the UK media regulator, that's Ofcom, is again threatening Russia Today for what they're calling bias, and this time it's for airing, quote, anti-Western views. And I just want to quote from this, the last paragraph, because Greenwald says, the UK government loves to lecture the world about infringements of liberty generally and press freedom specifically. I mean, the hypocrisy in that is unbelievable. He goes on to say, it does so as it threatens to revoke the broadcasting license of a media outlet for broadcasting anti-Western views and other perspectives at odds with the UK government, all the while shielding and venerating the equally virulent biases from pro-state television in the UK. That is the classic hallmark of how a government propagandizes its citizens, ensuring that they hear only those views of which the government approves and which serve its interest and agenda. So pretty strong words from Glenn Greenwald there, and I think we could agree with those.
We can. We can also say that the Telegraph unusually has pointed a big finger at the BBC, and that what they've said is simply, if you are as good as you say you are, BBC, then surely it should be a subscription. Everybody would be clamouring to pay the money to receive BBC television. You boast that the BBC is so great, but you're so worried, in fact, that you have to make sure that it's regulated and you've got to pay or go to prison. Wonderful.
Yes. Now, Tony Blair, well, Save the Children, absolutely vilified for giving Tony Blair an award some time ago. And in fact, it wasn't just members of the public that there was an outcry about, because actually it was Save the Children Fund staff and Save the Children Fund supporters, the people that collect the money. There was a widespread rejection of this move by Save the Children. And of course, and so now they have said that they are very sorry for what they did by giving Tony Blair, and they're trying to this award, and they're trying to backtrack a little by saying that it was really not his broad legacy that they were attempting to award here, but specifically his efforts in Africa at 2 G8 summits at Birmingham and Glen Eagles, and his efforts in Africa. Sorry, so it was 3 specific things he had done, and let's just forget the millions of dead as a result of his other actions.
So I get a bit confused here, Mike. So children die, as long as that's in the Middle East, then they don't matter. But if you save children in Africa, then you get an award. Yeah,
that seems to be the case.
Right. Okay, I'll think about that one. Well, on the subject of children.
Yes, so the Oxford report, the report on the Oxford paedophiles is out, and BBC here reporting that 373, or as many as 373 girls were targeted by sex gangs of men. Of course, they're saying it's all Asian men in this case, in Oxfordshire in the past 16 years. And this is the result of a serious case review. And they're saying that these offences happened between 2004 and 2012. And they're saying that Thames Valley Police and Oxfordshire County Council made many errors. And I think we could have told them that.
Well, we did tell them that. We told them that. We told the BBC that. We told Thames Valley Police that. We told Oxford safeguarding teams that. We told Radio 5, I think it was, that. But none of them wanted to take any notice.
No, so of course the focus still on the Asian paedophile gangs, and no focus on the white paedophile gangs. They still seem to be getting off scot-free.
Well, as do, of course, the white people who are arranging the rings themselves. And of course, if we look at what's happening around the government at the moment in Elm House, then the people who are coming into the limelight are white politicians and white members of the establishment. And I'm going to say, if some of our viewers and listeners are finding what we're saying difficult to grasp, simply let's have a look at how the state covers up. This was part of the conference agenda. We had abuse victims giving fantastically detailed information about how the state covers up for child abuse, how the rings go to a very high level. And it took a team of ladies put together by Strider to actually start to unravel this stuff. So we're going to cover more of what the conference has talked about over the coming days, just giving you a taster. But let's have a look at what Mr. Cameron has got to say, well, here's a beautiful distraction from paedophiles within the British government and the establishment circles, because we're going to put jail terms on those who neglect sex abuse victims. So if you're handling and trying to do your best for children within an educational environment or even social services, and you don't get it right, you are going to go to jail. But absolutely no mention of full and detailed investigation into paedophiles operating in and around Westminster. This is constant obfuscation, distracting of the public. And if I sound animated on this subject, well, believe me, I am. And what better man to introduce at this point than Robert Green? Sorry, well, there we are. Robert, of course, spoke out briefly at the conference. They had to be careful because his sentencing is due tomorrow at Aberdeen Sheriff's Court. But of course, Robert Green, classic, a man put in prison twice, not for abusing children, but simply trying to speak out and expose child abuse rings. And if this was an isolated case, we could say, well, maybe the British establishment, the British government has made a mistake, but this is not an isolated case. And it's outrageous that this man should have not only been in prison, but of course held under house arrest under David Cameron's Britain 2014-2015.
So Robert's sentencing is tomorrow. What do you think is the likely outcome of that?
Well, my view is that the Scottish state will back down from putting Robert back in prison. I don't think they will go for that option, because I think they know the clamour, the public interest that will create. My prediction is that the Scottish state will try and do something draconian in terms of gagging orders. And of course, they've used this on Robert before. You dare to speak out, you dare to try and warn people about child abuse, we're going to gag you, and if you break the gag, then you'll go into prison. So I'm going to put my money on the table that what we're going to see is the dictatorship, because that is what is forming in Scotland. That dictatorship is going to put a draconian gagging order on Robert Green. We'll see if I'm right. Well, what's happened to Melanie Shaw? Well, of course, Beechwood, Nottingham Beechwood child abuse victim and whistleblower Melanie Shaw has literally disappeared into the gulag of Britain's private prisons. She's back in Sodexo, profit-making HMP Peterborough, and the extremely worrying thing is that we've had no telephone calls, no letters, no communication with this very brave lady, and even her lay legal advisor has been deliberately blocked from communication, certainly from a visit by the prison, by Nottinghamshire Police, and by some what appears to be very dirty dealing with legal teams. It's just a coincidence.
Just before we move on from that, Brian just mentioned, of course, at the weekend as well, and there was Mickey Summers' protest, and
Nottingham.
very well attended in Nottingham, yes. And we're hoping to get some video for that later today, thanks to Fraggle, because he has offered it. So hopefully we'll have a bit of footage of that for tomorrow's programme.
Okay, and I'm going to say live today, we're aware that there is a little bit of frustration because we have stayed very much focusing on cases that we've dealt with over some time. Of course, Robert Green's part of that, certainly Melanie Shaw. We have not forgotten the other cases. We are going to be talking about the satanic abuse of the two young children in Northwest 2 area of London. We will be reporting on these, but for today we're just going to focus on Robert and Melanie, and indeed something that was brought into the conference. So another exceptionally brave abuse victim. This is Kaz on stage speaking out. She spoke for about 45 minutes, not only about her own abuse, but giving a detailed breakdown of how the paedophile rings have not just operated within the child care protection system, it's clear they've been running it. And her comments were backed up by a very brave social worker. We know a lot of social workers get a lot of flack for what they do. We have always said there are many good ones, And this wonderful lady, Linda, stepped up on the stage to give what was really a harrowing report about what is really going on in Britain to do with child abuse. Well, what else has been coming out in recent months to do with child abuse? Some of the charities have issued reports where they're saying, well, we've looked into ourselves and we've done nothing wrong. And Action for Children, very, very big charity. I think they've got a turnover of about 197 million. They've pushed out a report. I think it was actually conducted in August 2014, but we're now able to comment on it. And they've investigated themselves very satisfactorily and no problems. Well, this is the sort of thing they talk about, that they've contacted 153 former staff members who worked at the particular school under investigation, Penhurst, and they're saying, well, did Savile ever get there? So they wrote to members of staff and said, do you remember Savile ever coming to your school?
Can't remember.
You can't remember. Well, I spoke to John to see whether he'd had the same letter, and John could remember either. And we understand a few more of the staff, well, we've all probably forgotten. We've all forgotten. So no detailed investigation, it doesn't seem, but there were a lot of letters written. Well, it gets better. This is a bit more of the detail. And let's look at who Action for Children used to help them conduct the investigation. Well, it was none other than Oxfordshire County Council, the very organisation that completely failed to investigate abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, lost documents, bullied the very brave Asian gentleman that tried to protect the children, and ultimately documents lost and destroyed. But Action for Children thinks this is exactly the sort of child safeguarding team they should use to investigate themselves. It's great stuff. Well, have a look at the report, just blow a bit of it up here. It's very fuzzy, is what we would say. It's very well written, but absolutely no substance, no meat to it. And in any case, we've investigated ourselves and we don't appear to have done anything wrong. So that's good. Well, it gets better because the government has also pushed out this one, independent report for the Secretary of State for Health, themes and lessons learned from NHS investigations into matters relating to Jimmy Savile. It's a pretty interesting title, that, isn't it? It's sort of fairly fluid. Well, let's have a look. Here we are. Let's have a look at some of the independent authors. We've got Kate Lampard, who just happens to be ex-vice chair of NHS South of England. So this is not the NHS investigating themselves. And over here we've got a colleague, Ed Marsden. He was formerly working as an associate with the Prime Minister's delivery unit, so he's pretty independent from government. So let's have a look around Miss Lampard. Well, she's big in Esme Fairburn, and her colleagues include none other than the common purpose man, Sir David Bell. We've got down here Beatrice Holland, Millbank Investment Limited, and she runs the Lord Rothschild Family Office. So it's very interesting. You say, is this lady independent? And we've got another one here. This is Eleanor Updale. Sorry, we got it there in the end. And what's interesting is she's connected to Great Ormond Street Hospital, where I believe that Savile...
well, they just announced last week in that report that Savile had abused over 100 children and staff, in fact, during that time. And in fact, some of the children that were adults now, of course, some of the people that were giving witness to this were saying that the staff at Great Ormond Street were extremely dismissive of their allegations at the time.
Well, they're all independent. Let's add another one in here, because we've got an organisation here called Verita. Now, these are independent consultants, except when you look at how independent they are, they're not. So we've done Ed, and we'll add in his colleague Lucy Scott Moncrief. She's a mental health and human rights lawyer, Commissioner Judicial Appointments Commission, and she's been on the Prime Minister's Dementia Group. But all these people, Mike, are independent. It's very important that you should understand that.
Can I just clarify, is that to investigate the Prime Minister's dementia?
I think it could be. I know the Russians at the moment are very, very worried that they believe and I'm being quite serious, the Russians believe that Britain is now being run by mentally unstable people, and therefore it's virtually impossible for them to engage in a normal diplomatic way with the British government. I have to say I agree with them. Well, what sort of thing has come out about Mr. Savile? Well, it's a story. Have a look at the language in this report, and what you're looking at is nudging to take the public eye off. It says it's a story. Much of the story, it's unusual to the point of being scarcely credible. So we've got a scarcely credible story about Jimmy Savile. It goes on, it says, however, features of the story may have everyday implications and relevance to the NHS today. So it's a story, it's barely credible, and it may have features that are relevant today.
I mean, they're not far away from calling it a conspiracy theory.
Yeah. This is a very carefully constructed report, and this is nudging, it's applied psychology to simply say nothing really happened and it's not happening now. It goes on to here. So we've got a bit more. In light of other recent sex abuse scandals and allegations, the lessons learned from the Savile case must form part of a wider public conversation. We're not actually going to do anything about it, we're going to talk.
Yeah.
So I think we'll end there. How can we summarise? We've got paedophiles at work around the government, we believe running the government, buried in the police and our judicial system. We should be deeply concerned.
But we are doing something about it, and that began at the weekend.
Indeed. So we will have a more detailed report tomorrow. We'll be having a look at what took place with the grand juries. And we're going to start from here on towards the election, showing people just what needs to be done and what can be done in order to ensure that Britain, post-May 2015, is not the dictatorship that the Lib Lab Con wishes. So thanks for joining us. The rain and the hail beating down on the studio window. It's pretty gloomy in Plymouth.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.